Welcome to the Trail Chasers podcast. I'm your host, Dean Horwitz, and I'm excited to share this journey with you. Each week, we'll be hitting the trails with some of South Africa's most inspiring trail runners, diving into the topics that matter most and uncovering the secrets of this incredible sport. Lace up your trail shoes and join me on this adventure. New episodes every week. Thomas, James, welcome to the Trail Chasers podcast.
Thank you.
I'm very excited so this season on the Trail Chasers, I really wanted to do something different. And it's great to get an athlete's perspective, but it's also great to get a coach's perspective, especially with the coach and the athlete sitting next to each other. So I think that's going to be a lot of fun. So I'm very interested to dive into that. Obviously, Thomas, I've every time I say to someone, who should I interview? They say you. So, and I've followed your career and you've really improved a lot and done a huge amount, especially in the 100 milers. So I'm very, very keen to hear all about that. So welcome. Thank you for joining me. And let's dive right in. So I always like to start these podcasts by asking you, who is Thomas?
So, difficult. So I'm a runner, an endurance athlete, a professional mountain guide. Nothing really much to it. I just enjoy lots of hours in the mountains and love living out my passion. That's basically really what it is, or who I am. Bit nervous right now.
No, don't be nervous.
So basically I am what you call is a mountain bum in a sense. I spend all day for work in the mountains, whether it's rock climbing, hiking or trail running, and basically every day I'm also running in the mountains to train before I head to work. So many hours spent in the mountains, 6 hours plus. That's who I am.
Amazing.
I live, eat and sleep mountains, I guess.
Incredible. And James, who are you?
So I suppose I'm a teacher, I'm a coach, I'm a dad, and I probably should do more running than I do, but I'm also a runner.
Yeah. And tell me, what is the most embarrassing thing that's happened to you on a run?
So I was actually thinking about this. I've been fortunate to have not many embarrassing moments, but I think last week I decided to ditch with a few friends for a run. So they decided to head out at 5 a.m. and I was like, no, I woke up at 4:30 and I decided, let me just rather sleep until 7. And when I looked on Strava, as all of us runners do, we started monitoring like all the other guys' Strava events. I saw they broke a whole lot of crowns from basically running from Claremont all the way to the blockhouse on top of the Table Mountain. So I decided to download that GPS and then try and steal the crown from some of my running mates. So while I was running the course, I kept on running down. Like I would suddenly shoot 100 meters down, turn around, then shoot back onto like a trail, and then suddenly shoot 100 meters up the hill and down, back down. And then I finally, finished the run, got the crown, stole it from my mates Mike and Rick. And then I messaged them on our running group. Thanks very much for your crown, but please explain to me, why we were suddenly doing these 100-meter detours. Is it for extra vert, just because we can? And then they said to me, no, it's because it's all our toilet breaks.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
So, so you were faster than them, but so now next time you either have to do the toilet breaks or they have to stop taking toilet breaks.
Yeah.
There's also, I think we should have them on the podcast because it's like, why were both of them having toilet? Yeah.
So, that was quite embarrassing because, I was like, yes, so stoked to have won that crown, but in reality, I could have probably shaved off another 10 minutes, 10 minutes.
They should actually have a Strava, a thing like toilet break, like a toilet symbol. This is a good spot for the toilets. And James, what is...
The only thing I can think of is that I was training for the Marathon des Sables and on Table Mountain, and I fell and I cracked my skull open. I've still got the mark here.
Yeah, I can see that.
And I had parked at UCT, so I had to run through UCT, covered in blood from head to toe.
Wow.
I'd just had an encounter with Jack the Ripper.
Yeah.
The incredible thing is, of the 100 people that saw me, everybody acted like it was totally normal.
Yeah.
And nobody interacted with me.
Yeah.
Nobody offered to help me. They just all looked the other way, and I ran through UCT.
So a normal day at UCT, Yeah. It's always interesting that, not with the blood, but always with the trail running thing. Like I went today after the run, I went to one of the local coffee shops, and I walk in there like soaking wet, and everyone just looks at you like you've come out of, but no one like says anything. Everyone just like looks at you like you've come out of this like foreign place, like, and you hear the whispers, like, you know, it's super interesting. And take me back, Thomas, to the beginning. You know, how did you initially, I suppose, get into running? You know, take me back about the, you know, the mountain guiding.
So from basically early in my school career, primary school, you know, high school, I've always been a runner, always been a long distance runner. So primary school, obviously, you know, the 1,200 meters used to be that big distance in primary school. And I used to obviously race that, Western Province for that as well. And then at high school level, moved into the track side, 3,000 and 5,000 meters, and cross country, also racing track for Western Province and all of that. Basically from my side is continue that till the end of high school. And then I kind of burnt myself out. And when I started studying after school, actually stopped running completely. And just continued with the mountain guiding. You know, I've always had a passion for hiking and trail running and spending time in the mountains. So I've started focusing on that. And also back again in COVID, I decided to start trail running again. And so it's been a good 3.5, almost 4 years of competitive trail running.
Sure.
Broke back into the scene and enjoying it
Amazing. And talk to me a bit about like the before and the after of that kind of that journey.
I think when it came to like school level, you know, I was super competitive and training all the time and you know, at high school, you know, you think you're like the best thing ever, and you know, Olympic dreams and all of that type of stuff. And it basically got to a point where I just started overtraining and I lost the passion for running. So when it got to, you know, the time when I left school and started refocusing on other activities, it was a good way for me just to step back and reassess everything. And it took me a good 6 years to actually eventually get back into running again and competitive running. And I think that focus, you know, has come back, and I've refocused obviously from the shorter distances to now more the long endurance stuff that I've just, you know, have a passion for and found that it's just better suited for me, you know, for my body. And
And before, you know, like when you were in high school, like after high school, did you do any trail running, or like was it something you enjoyed, or like
So I think back in so I was in high school, matriculated 2012. Trail running was there, but it wasn't really, you know, a thing back then. And we used to do a lot of cross country running. So I think like, you know, that natural progression from cross country running is normally trail running, you know, running around the grass fields, you know, around the dams and stuff. And that's where, you know, I found my passion for long distance running and just running off trail essentially. So when I got back into the running scene, my first thing was trail running. I've never run a marathon before. I've never run a half marathon. I think the furthest race I've ever done on road is actually Puffer. It's the most road running I've ever done in my entire life. And so any time I actually ever train on road is to run the Puffer to be able to keep up with the other guys. It's messy.
What was the initial kind of movement back into trail? You know, was there a race? Was there a, you know, what kind of prompted that?
It's probably a bit of an embarrassing story. So I've been, like I said, a mountain guide for many years, and basically there was a whole lot of triathletes that hired me to guide them on Table Mountain, and we decided to hike up Clip Gorge. And when they got to the top, I just thought, I'm really unfit, you know, and I decided to actually start running to get my fitness up, because they started trail running base at the top. So I had to obviously keep up with them with a heavy backpack, and I think that just, you know, kick-started, okay, it's time to start running or starting to focus properly on trail running and distance to get that fitness to where it actually needs to be. So I don't feel, you know, uncomfortable keeping up with them.
And what at one moment was it like, oh, okay, I'm now like the fitness is up, but I actually want to take this a little bit more seriously and a bit more competitively?
I have an interesting story. So, you know, started running, just, it's normal social running from that side. And I ran the Musenberg Trail, the trail challenge. And I just ran that, with a whole lot of mates. I ended up coming 8th. And, as I finished, one of my good mates, Heath, he bet me a case of beer to run 100 miles race a month later. And I just decided, let me just try it, why not?
Okay.
From 21 kilometer race to, then it was Cedarburg Traverse, so it was a 180 kilometer race. And I'd run that, destroyed my knees, destroyed my body, but I ended up coming 4th. And then, I had this, passion for running then, and I realized, hey, I came 8th, and I came 4th. Maybe I should start taking this more seriously again. Yeah.
Amazing. And talk to me about your relationship with James, your coaching. When did that kind of start? How did that start? Talk to me a bit about that.
So
James, you can also obviously contribute here.
So I've known James for many years, for a very long time. And I think when I got into the space of, starting to come in the top 10, top 5, and I was looking at like all the other competitive runners, and I tried to figure out, okay, what am I doing wrong? What is the next steps for me to obviously to be able to improve? It's one thing, consistently hitting, 5th place, but there's other things where, you have to focus on, from like speed work or, your nutrition, the physical training cycles, obviously training correctly to obviously allow your body to be able to obviously compete at a high level. So I contacted James and I said to him, hey, I'm looking for a coach. I think my words was to him is, I love running. My biggest problem is I love overtraining. I have no problem doing 200 plus kilometer weeks. But I think I need someone to actually rein me in and say, hey, Tom, you actually need to cut back, because this is not doing you any favors. And I think that's where I got James on board, and we started looking at like how I train, my nutrition side, and how to, better focus or my training plan, or just myself, into competitive running, and being able to compete with the guys like Matt Bouch and Addy and all those other guys.
Yeah. And when you were coming 4th and 5th, what was the one thing that you thought, like before you obviously started coaching, like what was the one thing you were like, oh, I need to improve on that? Was there a specific thing, or was it just like, I need all round kind of?
I think like I didn't think it was one specific thing. I just like, I just realized, I'm just doing this completely wrong. It's when it gets to like the ultra distances, it's very difficult to pinpoint that one thing. James and I, we spend months, trying to focus on, let's change one key thing and see if that maybe helps him, improve one aspect of my performance, and then we slowly adjust things to see if it works or if it doesn't work. So I think I just went to him. It's like, generally just create a plan, and let's just see how, what works, what doesn't work. And we'll, over the years, we will just adapt this until we hit that level where I feel comfortable, or I know that I'm competing at a high level. And it's been, it's 2 years, almost 3 years of just competing but with James, and tweaking my training plans, nutrition plans, to be able to get to where I am now. And it's been a fantastic roller coaster. And James, I guess it goes into, someone, taking back to, when Thomas contacted you, how do you kind of approach that in terms of, someone comes to you and they're like, I want you to coach me. What's the next kind of steps?
So broadly speaking, it's kind of, where are you now and where do you want to get to? So a lot of it is to figure out where the athlete is. And I think that lifestyle as a whole is hugely important. So everybody faces, you, me, we all face our own challenges. So you have partners, you have pets, you have work demands. And I think a lot of that is a challenge that every person, faces. And athletes are basically in two groups. Thomas, I think, has already described. There's those who do too little, just probably me right now, and then those who do too much. And then those who do too much, it really is about use the word refine, and I think that's where we're at, is trying to refine the process and to perfect it, to find that sweet spot where we get the balance between what we're doing, very carefully selecting what we're doing, and then the recovery from that. And that takes place within the context of their lifestyle, of their non-running life, their partners, their kids, their whatever. So essentially, I mean, I'm meeting tomorrow a triathlete that I'm going to start coaching from tomorrow. And my first thing is to figure out, where is this person now? And then where do they want to get to?
That's awesome.
And
it sounds like you have quite a collaborative approach. Is that something you kind of push, or is that kind of from Thomas's side, it was like, cool, I want to work together? How does that kind of relationship dynamic work?
I think like it's, I will say, so like with James and I, or just with all these athletes, like, James he's not a Strava coach. I think you get lots of coaches out there, who just hyper focus on looking at your Strava metrics, and then, they maybe phone you and stuff. But James will actually come out, if he's planned, say, a 30K or 60K run, he'll come out and he'll run with us. He knows he can't keep up with us.
True story.
But he'll make sure there's
it's like, you go do those hill sprints. I'll just stay at the bottom, watch the...
So he'll try and run with us. Or if we're doing like a track session, he'll run around the track with us, and when he needs to stop and try and talk to us while we're doing, our warm down loops and stuff like that. So he's actually physically there. And one thing where, especially with this season, I've been super fatigued after all my racing, and my gait's just been completely out. And I didn't even realize, how my feet were landing, or, how I was actually running. And he actually picked up just off of the one warm-up session. It's like, hey, Tom, your gait's out. You actually need to go and figure out, or go and focus on.
You're not going to pick that up on Strava.
No, and you're not. So then we start adjusting my training plan to obviously help me fix that and start focusing on more strength and stuff like that. And I think that's what's fantastic is, James isn't coaching 80 or 100 people. He has a small select group that he focuses on, and he gives you all the attention, whether it's meeting you for coffee in the week or going for 30K runs with you on the weekend. It's been a fantastic ride, and a lot of personal attention, which is, I think, all of these athletes love.
And James, I think, just take me back also, what is your history, background, in terms of coaching, in terms of running?
So in terms of running, actually quite similar to Tom. I think we went to the same schools. In a previous era, I was there.
You're not the same age.
No, I know. It's hard to tell the difference. People actually think we're twins.
Okay.
But so started running in primary school, Kenridge Primary, went to Fairmont High School, carried on running there. Then to university. And in high school, I picked up an ITB injury. Best thing ever. I learned so much, and I started realizing if I ran on trail, it was much better for my body than if I trained on trail than if I ran on the road. And that's what got me into trail running. In terms of actual racing on trail, the first time I actually started racing trail was Puffer. And William Robinson, there's a legend you should interview. He got me doing the Puffer. And then coaching, I actually started coaching at school.
Oh, wow.
Our school didn't have a lot of coaching going on, so some guys asked me to help them. So that was about 35 years ago, maybe longer, and I've been coaching ever since.
Sure, and that was obviously more track and field.
That was more track and field. So I essentially, at school and university, was track and field and road running. And I did do duathlon, running and cycling for a while, and had opportunity to go to World Champs, which I did in 2000. And then when I came back, that's when William said to me, you got to try this Puffer thing. So I think we ran the Puffer for the first time 2004, thereabouts.
Wow.
And then I've done it off and on since then. And then started coaching, say, in school, and I've been coaching ever since.
Sure. Amazing. And now, where are you at currently? Are you exclusively trail coaching, or you said you have a triathlete, but do you have a mixed bag, or?
I have a mixed bag. So essentially, I'll coach anyone who does a sport which involves endurance running.
Okay.
So I have people do Ironman. I have people who race 5,000 and 10,000 on the track.
Okay.
I was talking to you about the steeplechase runner. I have people who focus on road running and trail runners. And interesting enough, of all those things, I have done all those things. The problem is Thomas. So, and the one thing I've never done is a 100 miler.
Okay.
And I had absolutely no interest in doing it. And now I kind of feel I have to do a 100 miler just so I kind of know from the back end of the field, but I kind of have some idea what Thomas is going through.
Yeah.
So that is still actually the only thing I haven't done that I really want to do.
Yeah. How do you coach someone to do a 100 miler when you haven't done a 100 miler?
So it's a bit of a challenge, but you mentioned earlier collaboration.
Yeah.
And there's two things that I look for. One is an athlete who wants to collaborate. An athlete who just needs to be told what to do is probably not a suitable candidate for my coaching. And then the second one is I look for an athlete who wants to bring out the hero in themselves, who wants to challenge themselves. And whether it's they want to do an Ironman for the first time or they want to break 20 minutes for a 5K or whatever it is. And I think those athletes are good for me to work with because that's something that my sort of personal style works well with. And the other thing is data. So Thomas mentioned Strava coaching, but actually without data, you cannot coach an athlete. So if the athlete's got good data and a good head for data, then in fact it's quite easy to do the numbers bit. Then the other challenges remain the same. How do you not get injured? How to deal with recovery? What to eat? How to live life so that you are ready for the race. Yeah.
And talk to me, Thomas mentioned the overtraining. How do you kind of deal with that type of, reining your athletes in, especially a 100 miler athlete who's like, I want to do how many 100 milers? 4 or 5 a year.
Yeah, or more.
Yeah, exactly. Like, how do you kind of deal with that and be like, okay, like settle down?
So data, I think, is very useful there. So when we look at defining the right metrics, because the data is still helpful. So if an athlete says, look, my heart rate is still elevated, and the athletes that I coach all know their heart rates. So they can see it's not a matter of I'm being lazy. And that's the hard part. These guys are so driven. They will drive themselves into the ground. So then it's using the data, trying to build some faith and some trust. And then when they see the results, then they'll go. Occasionally, I don't know if you're familiar with a thing called the Zatopek phenomenon.
No.
But Emil Zatopek, one of the greatest runners of all time, he, on a couple of occasions, broke world records after having been ill. And Abibi Bikila did the same. He won 2 Olympic marathons. The one after an appendicitis burst, and then it killed him, and the other one after rupturing his Achilles.
Wow.
So in both cases, he was unable to train for 3 to 6 weeks before the marathon. In both cases, he won and either broke the Olympic or the world record. And so occasionally an athlete actually has to bang their head against the wall and wake up and say, you know what, I'm exhausted. Coach, I actually do need to stop. I'm not going to say that happened to Thomas, but he can tell you that. But so it's a combination of working with the athlete and building trust, actually, and using the metrics.
Coming back to you, Thomas, let's chat a bit about that. So you got into running, you got a hold of James. How did it go from I need to run to keep up with my hiking groups to 4 or 5, 6, 7, 800 milers in a year?
Best way to say it is I always used to hang out a lot of trail running events and help out with the safety side of trail running events, especially for the Cedarburg Traverse. And over there, I met some real interesting characters. Probably some of the best ultra runners in South Africa, from Toby Renneker, Carstens, Cornelius. These guys are running. I don't know. I think Toby Renneker is the 17th person in the world to reach 100 miles. So they've been in the trail running scene for years. And always I didn't understand why they were doing, this ultra distance events and just continuously doing one every second, third month. And eventually I actually got to know them over the years and actually inspired me. And when I ran my first 100 miler, I got hooked. And then from there, I just decided something clicked, that the trail running community in South Africa is very small, and it's very passionate, and it's very welcoming and very supportive. But then you get the ultra distance side of the trail running community, which is realistically about less than 50 people, and they just, the words can't describe how actually supportive they are, from guys, giving you the headlamp so you can finish the race, and they know they're doomed, their race is doomed, but they know they're not going to finish, to sacrifice their own race to help you finish your race. It's like, that's the type of stuff that they are willing to do. And I think that's what also drives me to obviously try and push the limits within the South African trail running or ultra distance space. Yeah. And,
talk to me, I guess, about the last few years in terms of the races you've done, which kind of stood out. Talk to me, about the 100 milers. Have you done any other distances?
Yeah, so, my main thing is like I'm a 100-mile athlete. That's what I prefer. I do dabble sometimes in the odd shorter race, like, the odd 20K race, which fortunately with James's speed training, I can compete, but I'm not obviously at the level of like my Mike and all those other guys that are, speed demons. But I prefer the 100-mile distance. I've done 200K races, which is, I enjoy them, but I find they're a bit short. Like my body, just maybe because of the training, style of training I do, just prefers the 100-mile distance. My legs tend to open after 100Ks. But yeah, well, sorry, I just forgot the question.
No, it's all good. Talk to me about some of the races you've done, the highlights, like, and I mean, obviously also with 100 milers, like you don't have a huge variety, like I think, talk to me a bit about that.
Yeah. So, the race I've done is obviously like the typical, South African classics. So you've done like, Mac, Ultra Trail, Drakensberg, Addo 100, Karkloof.
Yeah.
So those are the four staples. And then you get like some like niche events, so like Cedarburg Traverse. It's not run every year because it's super rugged and it's very difficult. Most ultra distance runners would describe that as the cult race. You destroy all your gear, and it's probably one of the most difficult races that there is in the ultra distance or 100-mile scene. And then there's there is I'm trying to think now. There's like Kenton 100 and those type of races. So the 100-mile scene is slowly starting to grow, but the four core races, like the Mook challenges, I think those are the four competitive races that everyone wants to run and has the most support. Within that side.
Talk to me a bit more about that Mook challenge.
So the Mook challenge is it's a concept that was designed a couple of years ago by the original race directors of Addo 100, Ultra Trail Drakensberg, Mac, and Karkloof. So originally there only used to be 4 100-mile races in South Africa, and it was just a way for them to try and entice people to come do all 4. So that's in the essence where it started. Currently, there is only 13 people that have ever completed the Mook challenge to race all 4 100-mile distances within one calendar or one race season, one calendar year, one race season. It is super difficult, racing a 100-mile race every month for almost basically it's 5 months straight. It's the cumulative fatigue that is the most difficult. But every race has its own challenge, from Addo, from the heat and the distance, to Ultra Trail Drakensberg and the altitude, and the cold Mac is basically the coldest race out there. And then you get Karkloof, which is the actual challenge, isn't actually the distance, it's the speed in which you need to complete the distance in the humidity. I think that's probably the hardest part about it. So they all have their own unique challenges, which you basically have to problem solve to get through.
And how many times have you done it?
So the Mook challenge is my first year doing it.
Okay,
cool. So I've done now 16 100 milers within the last 3 years.
3 years, okay, wow.
Yeah, so that's where I am now. But so this season is probably the one season where I've actually gone and I've done more unknown 100 miles. So I typically normally do, Addo I've done 4 times. So Mac and UTD was the first races that I've never run. And actually went into an unknown race, or 2 of them. 2 of them went into an unknown race, not knowing the course, not knowing the area. And fortunately from my side is to change both courses. So no one knew it, we were all on a level playing field. But just going into that unknown on fatigue legs, you know, and knowing that with this challenge, trying to complete all 4 was quite a task, and mentally, physically, yeah.
So you've got one more, eh?
One more, Karkloof is my final one. It's in, 40 days? Yeah, 40 days time will be my final one. I'm fit and ready to go. The challenge is now, so there's an internal, within the Amok guys, so Justin, I forgot how to pronounce his surname, but I think it's Odenthal, has the fastest Amok challenge.
Is that like cumulative?
Yeah, cumulative time all put together. So I'm on track to beat that. I basically have to run a 21 hours 26 at Karkloof to be able to take.
It's apparently very easy. That's
they say that, but it's not actually. You know, I think what the challenge of Karkloof is the problem is it's so runnable that you start off too fast. And then when you get into the later kilometers, so 100 kilometers plus is where the race actually really starts. And the last marathon, 42 kilometers, the race, any 100-mile race, that's where it starts. And, you know, all that speed, all that, you know, you're pushing hard in the beginning with the humidity because the sun comes out, because Karkloof, you start at night, you know, really starts to bite back. So it's actually being able to hold back. To be able to obviously push in the later kilometers. But so it's difficult, you know, sub 24, it's probably the easiest race to get a sub 24, but it's also extremely difficult to get a sub 24. And I think that's what, you know, the beauty of that race is that it is easy, so you can break if everything goes right on that race, you know, nutrition, no injuries, no blisters, you know. But it's going to be interesting to see obviously how I perform this year.
How's your body feeling?
Tired.
Okay, I can imagine.
Tired, absolutely tired. I think, like with James and I, it's this constant discussion of with this cumulative fatigue. You know, running Addo end of March, 3 weeks later running UTD. I was fortunate that this year that Vermaak got pushed out by an extra 3 weeks because of MUT. So because of that, you know, I had an extra 3 weeks of recovery, which I came then fortunately third at Vermaak last month or 4 weeks ago. So 40 days time to be able to run a 21 hour 26 is going to be quite hard on the body with less than 8 weeks of recovery and 4 ultras in the legs before then.
And James, you know, you obviously chatted about it, but when Thomas comes to you and he's like, I want to do this challenge, what is the kind of reaction? What is the, how do you get ready for that? How do you, put a training plan into practice? So
my broad approach is, if an athlete wants to do something, my job is to help them get it right. I will say though that, I will admit that I definitely underestimated, the amount of recovery we needed after Addo. And I think I probably didn't rein back Thomas, and if anything, I probably pushed him to get going again for the next one. And I've done a lot more research, so physiological research since then. And there's no doubt that we needed more recovery time. And what's interesting is you asked about how to prepare for a 100-mile, is that the 100-mile background that he has, including Addo itself, is the foundation of the endurance for what comes next. So I was sort of worried that he would lose too much endurance, but that just hasn't happened. And Vermaak has really proved that. So I've learned a huge amount, probably at Thomas's expense, but about how his body works in terms of he seems to sort of log that mileage, that endurance. But the flip side is that he's been doing some of the speed work with some other guys, particularly Neil Bruce, and that has definitely been hugely beneficial. So I think, I put together a plan. We try and make it work, and then we fix what didn't work. And what didn't work was we rushed the recovery. I think that looking back, it needed a lot more. I mean, the one thing, and I still don't fully understand this, is that if you just think about the amount of sleep that is lost in a race like this, and if you try and catch up an extra half an hour a night, which for a working person is already a challenge. If you've lost 15 hours of sleep, that's a month. And And so, in fact, it can't be done.
Yeah.
So you have to end up making compromises. And so I think we've learned a lot. And I think I'm pretty sure that we'll get it right for Carcliffe. I think he's going to have a good Carcliffe. There are lots of other things that can go wrong. I don't know if he wants to talk about Ultra Drakensberg. For me, sitting in Cape Town was absolutely terrifying because initially his tracker didn't move at all.
Yeah.
So I thought either he been run over by a Lesotho donkey or he'd forgotten his passport and he was sitting at the border control. But
and there's no signal, eh?
No.
Yeah.
And lots of things went wrong at Ultra Trail. And I think in a way that's, in my view, his best race ever because he pushed through all those problems and there's a huge... And although it couldn't have been much fun at the time, I think that's incredibly affirming of why he is so good at this sort of event.
Yeah. Geez. It's a lot of problem solving.
I think so that's the one thing that's about with like the ultra distance or the 100-mile spaces. You just have to be, comfortable being by yourself. And the best way to really describe it is, I think it's like one of my fellow teammates, Ludelia, said, one only truly knows himself once you spend 24 hours in the mountains by yourself with no music, and in your own thoughts. But with regards to Ultra Trail Drakensberg, I had a complete equipment meltdown. I've been fortunate for the last 3 years to never have a single equipment failure. And within the space of one race, losing my headlamp, damaging my foot, getting my first blister in my entire life. I've never had a blister before until that race. Everything just went completely wrong. That one guy, Dirk, actually ended up running with me for 30 kilometers, trying to keep up at my pace just to try and give me some light with his own headlamp, which obviously, unfortunately, made him burn out. So he actually lost his goal time just to try and help me do my own time. And I think that's what stands, like I said to you, so with the 100-mile runners, they'll give you the shirt off their back to help you obviously achieve your goal. And being able to push through the night in the cold, in the rain, more than 100 Ks before I could get to my next equipment drop to actually be able to get the equipment I needed to continue the race and try and catch up. Was a difficult race for me, but also, one where I learned a lot. And I realized, I can push through anything as long as, just put one foot in front of the other and just slog it out.
And you came what position?
I came 12th overall, 7th male.
Amazing.
So it wasn't the most ideal race.
Yeah, but especially with all those challenges.
Yeah, with all those challenges, everything, went right. And also running on tired legs. I think that's the one thing with that is, with the Mook guys, I think I beat the next guy behind me was Derek Gutierrez. I beat him by almost 9 hours in that race. So, testament to James for all the correct training. And, that I managed to put in just before that in that short space of 3 weeks.
Yeah. And I want to go back to that, you mentioned now about the Mook Challenge and the competitiveness of it, because I think what kind of obviously gets lost in the whole thing is like, it's a challenge to complete it.
Yeah.
There's no challenge to, there's no challenge to like win every single race or anything like that. But obviously internally there's a lot of competitiveness amongst the guys. And also, has anyone won all of those races in a calendar year at the same time? So
no one has won. So with the Mook Challenge, it's just the challenge is it's a self challenge just to finish all 4 races in a race season or one calendar year. And then internally there are obviously like just within the group just challenges who can obviously pick up the most amount of time between everyone. But I don't think, as far as to my recollection, no one's won every single race. It's very difficult, one, to obviously to be able to make the top 5 or podium, because the cumulative fatigue is real. When you're hitting that 100K or 100K mark, you start to feel the previous race in your legs. And it's just testament to like Justin and all of those guys that have been able to push hard, to come in the top 3 or come second for these races where, everyone else is running on fresh legs.
Yeah.
And you have to try and just slog it out behind them and keep within distance to be able to know once I hit that 100K and that race begins, I can try and kick into, I call it 4x4 mode.
But you've had some good results.
Yeah, so I've been fortunate to have some good results. One race, like probably was, I wouldn't say it was embarrassing, but with the last 15 Ks, I could feel my legs, and I got to 3 Ks in, and everyone was cheering me, "Come on, run!" And I was just like, "No, I'm gonna walk. I'm walking the next 3 Ks." Like my legs were just rebelling. It's like, no, it's got too much in them right now, and I was fortunate that with all of us having trackers and stuff on, I was a bit cheeky, and I turned on my phone and I looked where everyone else was, and I realized, hey, I'm more than 3 hours ahead of the fourth person. So I decided, we'll just walk the last 3 Ks in. I'll have plenty of time, and I still kept that distance.
Sure. So there was third place, and then Addo,
I came third as well.
Yeah.
And so Addo third, UTD 12th, 7th male, and then Mac third.
Sure.
Overall. Yeah, so some good race results for the season.
Yeah.
I was hoping originally, like a little internal goal I never really told James, I was hoping to try and make a podium for all 4.
Yeah.
But maybe another season.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, as someone who's obviously quite competitive, how do you kind of take your mind off the immediate kind of challenge for the kind of greater, like in that race, you're like, you really want to push and you really want to, win the race, but you're also like, there's a bigger goal here.
I think so with obviously the 1600 milers that I've done, if I look back to like my original, first 3, I've managed to learn that the race doesn't start until, like I said, the last 40 kilometers after, or the last 60 Ks.
Yeah.
And, to push in the first 100 Ks, it's a I don't want to say a stupid thing, but, you really start to feel it towards the end, and it's not worth the amount of effort and the stress you put on your body. Just rather take it slow. So I've managed to learn through the experience of racing, advice from James, advice from all the other runners or trail runners, within that scene. And I've pushed after the 100K to obviously get to that spot. But I've just been so fortunate that I've had nothing seriously go wrong, injury wise and stuff like that. And I've just had the legs and the correct training to obviously allow myself to be able to push in the end to get to those podium positions. But it's just about, I guess, problem solve. Who can problem solve the fastest within the race, I guess.
Yeah. And James, how do you kind of train someone as I guess to rein it in, but also to kind of focus on their own race? I think a lot of people kind of struggle with that. As soon as everyone else is running, you're off, and especially obviously in the context of a 100 mile or an endurance event, that like with the 20K or something, if you push hard, you'll be fine. But if you for a 100 mile, if you push hard, you're going to be toast. So how do you kind of train the athlete to keep that in mind? And
So I think that we've had a lot of conversations about how his best races have gone.
Yeah.
And just again, I spoke earlier about having faith in a system that works. So exactly as he says, you've got to do the first 100 Ks, you've got to be sensible. With my track runners, the equivalent is you run the first part of the race on the watch, and the second half of the race on your guts, and your courage. Yeah. And it's exactly the same here. So to monitor yourself and to run the most efficient race you can, and then the second half you go for it. Yeah. Obviously, ultimately, the athletes are out there on their own, and if they don't have the racing ability or the confidence in their own training, they're going to mess it up. Yeah. But obviously Thomas does, and gets the results. And I think one of the things one does for an athlete as a coach is tell people they know what they're doing, is affirm people, let them believe in themselves. Yeah. And maybe that's one of the values of a coach. You're not emotionally involved with the athlete. They're not your partner or whatever. Yeah. You are just there to tell them, to assure them, to show them their strengths, which they obviously all have, and then to identify any weaknesses. But luckily, that one of Thomas's strengths is pace judgment.
I would say I get 99% of the time right. It's just the one race that is, what's the word to use? It's just like the thorn in my heel is UTCT, with all the trail running community lining up on the first 20Ks. I tend to always misjudge that, just as you're going up, cliff neck and everyone's patting you on the back, just tend to always overdo it on that race. And I always feel burnt out within the first. So that's one race that I've never managed to pace correctly. Unfortunately for this season, I'm not running UTCT. I've decided to pull back and refocus on other races for next season. But that's the one race I will say is I've not managed to get the pacing or figured out, problem solved to have to be able to finish that race within a good time.
And how do you kind of manage that in the not UTCT, but the kind of that manage like to keep yourself in your head and be like, I'm running my own race. Like, don't focus on the other people.
So I guess it's like there's a lot of things to it. So one for Addo this year with the heat. When we started at 1:00 in the afternoon, it was over 46 degrees Celsius. And I knew like Anele and I were basically shadowing each other. I would go off, Anele then would shadow me, and then Anele would go off and I shadow him. And in the end, it actually bit us both. Like we both ended up getting a bit of heat stroke. And I realized I had to pull back because that would be the end of my race if I tried to continue shadowing Anele. So what I did was I whipped up my poles because I know, as much as my running poles helps me move efficiently in the mountains, it also slows me down. So it's just like mechanisms like that to help obviously reduce my pace because I knew I was going to, come off second best if I continued to push as hard as possible.
Yeah. And talk to me, I think one of the things we obviously haven't touched on, but you're not a professional runner. You're running 100 miles. You're running are you just doing a MOOC this year? Is that are there other ones on the?
I'm with my racing season.
I love how you look at James like we haven't had this discussion yet, but
James knows. I'm terrible. So I'm terrible when it comes to the race calendar. I kind of said to James hey, this is my general plan. And then I chop and change as the season goes on because, either, I have a niggle here or I come up with some crazy idea hey, maybe I want to run a 200 mile or something like that. So the general season for this year, so specifically for this year is my first goal was to either try and get into Western States or UTMB. And then that, I would focus on that and then I would focus my race calendar around that. Unfortunately, I didn't get into any of those this year. So, the next best plan was, why not? Let's pull the trigger on the MOOC challenge. It's for 100 milers. I've got the training in and we'll focus on that. And then from there, I'll chop and change and find races. So originally Puffer, with the Puffer group is I got asked to be on a Puffer team. So it's it's a B race for me, but I'm using it as a training race. And then after Carl Cliff, I'm going to take off, 3 weeks and I'll reassess and decide what other races I want to do, if it's going to be maxi or, some shorter stuff. But with it is, it's just, I think his difficulty is actually trying to manage me. I don't enter races until the closing date of a race. I'm known for that. I'll wait till absolutely last minute because you never know with the amount of mileage I'm doing. I'm doing more than 5,000 plus kilometers a year, of running.
I think that's what I've done in my entire running career to date. I was quite proud. I looked at my thing. I was I've done 5,000. Oh yeah. Okay, I'm just going home now.
So I do a lot of mileage, and I think it's trying to balance my race calendar, training, social running, work, because that's the downside about my work is I'm in the mountain, walking up and down the mountain, it is fatigue, you get fatigue from it, walking up and down Clip or rock climbing, one of those. So I try to balance all of that with James and what's the next race? And he's obviously running along behind me, trying to
literally
refocus me on okay, you need to calm down here, this work on, speed training there, that type of stuff. So I think it's a difficult process, but Yeah.
You're getting it right.
We're kind of getting it right.
Mostly.
We're getting there. Yeah, mostly. I would say 90% there. There's a few things next season.
So talk to me, life outside of trail running. Yeah, and then also obviously talk to me about, the lure, I guess, of being a professional trail runner and kind of sponsorships and things like that.
So lifestyle outside of trail running is, like I said, I'm a professional mountain guide. So I spend all day in the mountains, rock climbing, hiking, trail running, and that. And that's just like I've built my career, my passion, just my hobby all around the mountains.
Do you is that like you kind of get like people that are just like, cool, I want to, like, from overseas or tourists and things like that, or?
Yeah, so I'm pushing. I work for a company called Wild Horizons that does all of that, and so it's a best of both worlds. So you get the two sides of mountain guiding. You get like the guys that are freelance, and then the guys who work for a corporate company. So I'm fortunate to work for a corporate company. So whether I guide or don't guide,
I think the first time I've heard someone say I'm fortunate to work for a corporate company, but
whether it's bad weather, like this week it's been terrible. I still get my paid my full salary.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
So where the other guys, if they don't work, they don't get paid. So I can focus on training. It's one of the things that has helped me within the trail running scenes, because I don't have to, suddenly drop training to go, go and work. And I know how I can plan around my work, plan my training around my work, and obviously factor everything in. And I think that's like the positive side of working for a corporate company. With the mountain guiding side, is obviously I get to be out all day. So I hate office work. I think the worst part of my week is every Friday when I do my admin. That's probably the worst part. But training wise, we try to get it right. With trail running, you want to run as much as you can, but you also need to bear in mind of performance. And I think that's the difficult part is now that I've been sponsored athlete with Scarpa and Black Diamond for it's actually been a year. It's actually right now it's been a year. As today, it's actually a year.
Oh wow!
Actually,
I don't know. Just say happy birthday. Happy
I don't know
anniversary.
either. I just thought about it now. Yeah. So from today, it's actually been a year with Scarpa and Black being on their team. I think the hardest part was actually this season is because now that I don't want to have more eyes on me, it's actually bringing in the results and showing everyone that why I am sponsored by Scarpa and Black Diamond.
I think that's actually a good point to kind of segue into, is like I was saying before this interview, I've actually interviewed Emily Jacques and also chatted to Doug Pickard as well. And it was quite interesting that the three of you are all kind of very underrated, and very like under the radar. Whereas, most trail runners and the elites kind of are very much in the spotlight, and it's kind of part of the job. So talk to me a bit about that aspect, how you manage it, and how do you, I think Emily, one of the things is like, you don't enjoy it, but you kind of have to do it.
So I'm still learning. I think that's the hardest part, is like you get like, guys that are, I look at like Matt Bosch, Bouchy's, like your social media game is on point, and I just look at him like, I would love to shoot pictures like that, and get that content that he's getting out. But I've never been really a social media person, and I think like when I got the sponsorship with Scarpa and Black Diamond, I realized, hang on, they're putting all their trust in me and showing, from their side that they believe that I am one of the top runners in South Africa. And so I need to actually figure out how to get the social media on point to actually help push their brand. And I think that's been the hardest part, is because I'm not on social media, most people don't really know who I am unless you know me. And it's been a good thing and a bad thing in a sense, where a lot of runners don't know who I am until I rock up on race day. And the ones that do know who I am, who know I am, and I can compete with them. So it's a positive and a negative in a sense, but it's just the struggle to try and be able to tackle the social media side is very difficult, and I'm learning a lot. I don't specialize in that. It's difficult for me to suddenly like go on my 3-hour run and be like, hey, let me stop for half an hour to shoot some content. So I'm fortunate that I have a whole lot of photographers and stuff, friends who force me to go out to actually go and shoot some content so I can post. But it's a learning curve, and I haven't got it right, but hoping over the next year or two to get it right.
And talk to me about that kind of professional side of trail running. Is it the goal, and how much does the kind of the social media and the media kind of aspect of it kind of be like, oh no, I don't want to, like, I love the idea of it, but the media side is a bit scary.
So yeah, obviously the goal is to be able to run all day, every day. I think that's the main thing, and be able to turn 100% professional. Unfortunately, like I said, in my space where I am now is with my job, they allow me to go and trail run all the time, which is fantastic. With the sponsorship, it allows me access to some of the races and be able to obviously focus more on running. But the difficult part, I think, within the South African trail running scene is it's still a very small community. So you get a few guys that have been fortunate to be sponsored by the international teams who can do trail running full time because they are pulling a salary from it. But from the South African side of the South African sponsorship, a lot of the guys are not able to make a permanent salary from it. So I think that's where a lot of us struggle. All of us are trying to train on our off days and work at the same time. But it's slowly getting better within the South African trail scene. And I see, tipping points, call it in the next 5 years, you'll start to see better performances from the South African trail runners, because a lot of the brands are now starting to actually push more money into the trail running side.
Yeah. And talk to me a bit about, I guess for both of you, the advice side of it, in terms of someone starting trail running for the first time, what kind of advice or what lessons have you kind of learned that you would kind of tell someone?
Do you want to go first?
I think, so let's say they're going to enter a race or something. I think two things off the top of my head. One of them is milestones. So I said earlier, start where you are now.
Yeah.
So let's say the furthest you've done is a park run, with the family, and you want to run a 20K trail race. So you can just map out from a 5 to 20, these are my milestones, and then tick them off as you progress.
Yeah.
That's the safest way of doing it. And then, so to go about like that. And the second one is what I call simulations, and that is to practice things.
Yeah.
So if you're going to, let's say, carry a backpack with water, which you've never done before because you don't need that for the park run, get that, practice that, and get used to, does this feel comfortable, and so on. So if you do the simulation thing and you do the milestone thing, you're probably going to be ready on the day.
Yeah.
So I think if you follow those two. The other thing is that running is quite a hard sport, I think.
Yeah.
In fact, anything where you try and achieve something is difficult. So you've got to go a little bit as you get along. And then and the final thing with that is what motivates you.
Yeah.
So I mentioned I was going to see another triathlete tomorrow. What I need to do is to figure out what motivates this guy. So some people really love to run with other people. Some people love to run or ride in beautiful places. Some people want to be in groups. Some people like to train indoors and so on. And to tap into whatever motivates you. Yeah. So I think if you get those things right, it'll be pretty easy. The only problem with all that is that you have to have some measure of patience. Yeah. And I just don't think there's a way you can shortcut that. Yeah. And if you do shortcut it, then there's some pain involved. Yeah. So you heard the story of the first 100 miler. It is a risky option because there's going to be some pain involved. Yeah. And sometimes it works out okay. But I've also seen athletes who've done that and have permanently injured themselves. Yeah. So it's be patient, be progressive, and enjoy it. Yeah.
I think from my side is I see a lot of new runners coming into the scene and they get caught up in I don't want to say phases. So specifically like brand shoes, this is the latest and greatest shoe. Yeah. And I find that a lot of guys, they tend to, I don't want to say brand names, but this shoe is like the best thing. Everyone's wearing it, but so they buy it, but it doesn't work for them. And then they hyper focus on this is the thing because everyone else is wearing it, I must wear it. I think the hardest part is for a new person coming into running is actually spend the time and find the shoe that actually works for their foot shape, you know, because a lot of guys almost try to force to convince themselves like this shoe is going to work for me. And that's probably the hardest part, or the first thing that with running is actually figuring out what socks work for me, what shoe shape works for me, and you know, it's drop, heel stack, what heel stack heights and stuff. And then once you've kind of figured that out, you know, you can then start training correctly. Because if you start wearing the wrong shoes, if you're not comfortable, you're not going to be training well, and you're not going to want to run. I think that's the biggest thing. And then like James said, is I don't want to say train to eat, but that's one thing I find with a lot of endurance runners or people new into endurance running. They don't train like they're on a race. So specifically, you know, for 100Ks, I find with like a lot of guys that are running through, starting to head into the 100K or 50 kilometer distances, when they do training runs, they'll run 50 kilometers without eating or drinking correctly. And when it gets to race day, you know, or 2 weeks before a race, they'll message me and they'll say, hey, what nutritional products should I take? And by then it's too late. You know, you actually have to spend the time and use all the products to find out what works for me, what doesn't work for me, and actually run with it on training runs to actually eat it to find, okay, my body likes this. Because you don't want to get caught in a situation when, you know, you're 50 Ks into your first race and then your stomach starts rejecting the food and you just can't keep anything down. And
what lessons do you think, you know, that you've kind of learned from the 100 miler that can kind of be applied across the board, you know, in terms of trail running?
Foot maintenance. I think that's one thing I've been fortunate. For a long time, we used to have a standing joke within like my training group is I'd never lost a toenail. I've still, you know, until after the race, I kicked a stone and then I managed to lose my toenails. Now that you know, is done. But I think it's good foot maintenance is what people tend to do is they keep their socks on for too long and they don't care about their feet. You know, by the time you start feeling the blister, you know, it's too late. You know, that blister's coming. So I have a thing where I always carry, it sounds a bit excessive, but 3 pairs of socks in my bag, where, you know, I know at 20 Ks or 30 Ks after river crossing, I will change regardless if my feet feel comfortable or don't feel comfortable, because your feet is the biggest thing with running. And as soon as you've hurt your feet or your feet aren't great is when you start to struggle in the race. You know, people always think, you know, I'm going to lose 5 minutes changing my socks or 10 shoes. You know, you might lose 5 minutes changing your socks, but you know, when you're moving at 10 Ks an hour late on in the race, or 8 kilometers an hour, with the other person with blisters moving 4 kilometers an hour, you know, you've really made up that time and you'll beat them by an hour or two.
And talk to me, I guess, James, you can also talk about this, you know, is everything other than the running, you know, how important is that in terms of like getting, I mean, Thomas did mention the fueling, you know, and the other things, you know, like the strength and conditioning, things like that, you know, it's something that people obviously neglect. How important is that, you know, in terms of the running?
So for me, like, I'm terrible at strength and conditioning. So I'll start before James carries on. So that's one thing I've always neglected. I always say, I'm going to go and do it, and then you maybe do it for 5 minutes, and then I get distracted and go and watch Netflix or something. So we spoke, especially this year with the amount of running or racing I was meant to do this. Basically I signed up at Sports Science at their strength and conditioning workshops to force myself to actually do it 3 times a week with all my training, because we knew, you know, that was an area where I don't do it at all. You know, I've managed to learn now to get it done once a week, but it's still an area where I actually have to still improve on. And James reminds me of that whenever you can.
I guess that's also, I guess, not necessarily why it's important, but like, how do you kind of deal? Because I think it's all athletes, especially like trail runners, who like rather be in the mountains than doing this type of stuff. So how do you kind of stress the importance of that?
So where I'm at the moment in terms of that, I think that injuries happen to all athletes. You know, so, and I think we totally underestimate their prevalence, basically. And I think the key thing in terms of injury prevention is to figure out a plan for each athlete and design a program that's going to work for them. And then in terms of the stuff outside of running, that's part of that in the sense of how to make it work practically. So it's Monday, I go to the gym or whatever it is. But I think the idea of life outside running and its impact on your running just cannot be underestimated.
Yeah.
So, and when I see the difference between the athletes I coach, those that end up not achieving their goals, when I look back, I realize, okay, on Monday, they were going to train, but they had to buy cat food or whatever. And those once-offs become commonplace.
Yeah.
And it's the ability to manage, get enough sleep, manage your day job, manage your relationships, and still find time to train is a challenge.
Yeah.
And that's, of course, then what makes it more difficult with things like strength training. So I think that the future is going to be athletes building stuff they can do at home. So I've been experimenting with myself on building a home gym, basically with a very basic equipment, as well as going to an outside gym from a time management point of view.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that's quite what you're asking me, but,
it is. Yeah.
But I think that the future is trying to individualize the training. So as I start to learn about what Thomas needs more of, we can build in collaboration with sports science the best program for him. And I don't think he needs to do a huge amount.
Yeah.
If you look at the studies, I have the history of hundreds of runners. The majority of them do very little, but of that sort of work. But you've got to find a way to ensure it doesn't become your Achilles heel.
Yeah.
Often quite literally. And that's the plan. So each athlete, I call it idiosyncratic. So every athlete, you and me, Thomas, all have our weaknesses.
Yeah.
And then once we've had an injury, we have to accept we're probably going to be at risk of that for the rest of our lives.
Yeah.
And we then need to build a plan that for eternity, we manage that about us.
Yeah.
And what I may need to manage may not be what you need to manage. And so part of the process for me and Thomas is me getting to know him and him getting to know himself, and over time refining it.
I like that.
Yeah, I think touching on that, we realized also, chatting to some of the bikinests at Sports Science and stuff like that, is because of this Vermaak challenge and the cumulative fatigue, we spent the beginning part of the year just having a huge block of strength and conditioning training, because we realized that once I start my racing schedule with the Vermaak challenge, it would be very difficult for me to continue a full program of strength and conditioning with the amount of running and maintenance running that I needed. So we heavily loaded three times a week strength and conditioning with my full training program. Some weeks I was doing 160 Ks and 3 hours of strength and conditioning training in the week on top of that, which I felt that.
Yeah,
I definitely felt
imagine.
it. But
but it's always the strength and conditioning you feel. That's the fault. That's the one. Yeah, it's the 1 hour of strength conditioning, not the 15 hours of running. That's the one.
Yeah. So we realized, and then as after my race, spend time in more maintenance runs, and then I try to focus a little bit stuff by myself, tried to do it, but eventually I'll be honest, I stopped doing it. But I think where I'm in a fortunate space is with my job. Some of the exercises that you do at strength conditioning, carrying heavy loads, the calf muscle exercise, I'm doing that on a daily basis, carrying up a 40 kilogram bag up, platter clip, with a calf muscle and stuff. So I honestly have stronger legs than I need, but it's in a favor. I think with James is chatted to a lot of coaches, chatted to a lot of athletes, and also to myself. It's to find that balancing act between what I need and what I don't need, and also not overdoing it. We don't like to change too much all at once. And because I'd never really done strength and conditioning, he didn't heavily load that on, because we just want to factor in, was it the strength that made me have a better season, or was it the nutrition, the change in my nutrition had a better season? And slowly as the season goes on, next season we will factor in a few more things and we'll figure out, what's that special sauce, what do I need more of? And then we'll take it from there.
I love that. And if you had to go back, to when you kind of started trail running, what would you tell yourself? And then I guess, James, you can jump in here. What would you say to James and Thomas, in that, in the beginning of the kind of the relationship?
I think if I go back in, when I first started, and I also started doing relatively well, I started hyper focusing on speed, I must improve all the time. And I think like what now, if I look back at it is, if I look at like, I used to hammer out the kilometers, and I realized, running 40, so case in point, I used to do like back-to-back 40Ks, no problem. Like, this was the best way to train, like, volume. And then with James, making me focus, I realized, whether I'm doing 40, spending 4 hours, 5 hours running 40Ks, but it was actually just junk miles. It wasn't really improving my running. It just I basically just wasted my time. Or I could run, an hour and a half, 20Ks on trail. That was good, good speed, good climbing. My gait style was correct, all of that type of stuff, where that was actually more focused training, was actually more beneficial doing an hour and a half than it was doing 5 hours. And I think like with a lot of new runners, or if I look back myself when I was younger, it's just like, don't hyper focus on like doing high mileage. It doesn't always
get off Strava.
Doesn't always necessarily mean a good thing. And also don't care what other people think. I think that's the biggest thing. It's like, you're there for the enjoyment, and you don't want to lose that passion by just over analyzing everything, and then basically you lose that enjoyment when you start over analyzing and be like, I'm not as fast as Dean, or I'm not as fast as James. You're there to run your own personal best time, and that's the way you should think about it.
James?
I wish when I was much younger, in my 40s, I'd done 100 miler. That's the only thing. So I think for me, the challenge with us is enough communication.
Yeah.
So most other athletes live very close to me, and we train together more often. And so Thomas has really tried hard in the face of oncoming traffic to get out to Belleville to train our way. And I do the reverse, go to the waterfront to meet him for coffee, and we spend as much time as we can. But to me, that I can't understand him without communicating.
Yeah.
Part of it is running together, because an athlete is different when they're running, and part of it is looking through, revising what happened at races and so on. So, and I think if we could do more of that, that would be great. But that's just life. So I think we've done well. I think that. The only thing is, it's a bit like fixing a bicycle while you're riding it, in the sense that we started training, I think, just before Carcliffe. Yeah. So 2 years ago, just before Carcliffe, about this time now, about 2 years ago, and so it kind of things were already happening. So the ideal is to start earlier from my point of view, but I think it's been a good, and because we collaborate well, I think that is the key. So I think it's gone well. Like say, the only thing I would have done differently is when I was much younger, in my 40s, done 100 miler. But I still have that to look forward to. So
amazing. And to end off, what are the big goals? You've chatted a bit about the rest of the year. What are the big goals? What are the big races, adventures?
There's a lot of planning going on. So obviously finish a muck, that's the big goal. My long-term goal is to get 100 miles. I want to I would like. Has
anyone done that?
Yeah, so I think that the Toby Rennick is the only South African to have done it.
Is this competitive, like a race 100 miles?
Yes,
or I suppose no one really does 100 miles for fun, but like,
so it's like most of them are actually Americans that have it. So like I said, Toby is the 70th person in the world to have done it, and then I think the next South African or female side is Cornell Medcalf. I think she's on 40 something.
How many is Marius on?
Marius is on like 20 plus, because he keeps on now doing 200 miles. He's still factoring that in. But so 100 miles is obviously my long-term goal. It's like something I would love to do long-term. But I think it's just like my goals is obviously UTMB, Western States, Hard Rock, those bucket list races, Marathon des Sables, those bucket list races. But my main focus on now, I used to just be like focusing on like, let's just finish the race, or, do well. And now I'm starting to focus more on speed, I would like to run Carcliffe in, sub 16 hours one day, like that type of stuff. So it's just getting that training in to be able to achieve those big goals, sub 16 Carcliffe, or a sub 20 UTCT, you know, or being able to actually get on the podium one day at UTCT. It's you never know. So I think those are the big goals now that I would like to focus on, and just also pushing the distance. I think like you look overseas in America now, and the next big distance is 300 miles.
Jeez, okay. When did we skip 200? Yeah.
So like in SA, 200 miles
I love
is still
James shaking his head. Like he's like, "Hey, I'm out. Find a new coach. I'm done."
So 200 miles is the new big thing. So currently there's 200 miles. So it's Longmore and Mac 200 miler. There was Tankwa, but that's not fallen away. So I think next year they're focusing on, it's called the Triple Challenge, where you do all 3 200-mile races in 1 year. Possibly on the cards. I haven't spoken to James about it. I don't know if I'm interested in doing it. That just sounds like a terrible season of just being broken the whole year. Yeah. But you never know. Like I think with the 100-mile distance now, my perception of distance is very different. For the guys that I train with, the average person says, "Oh, my long run's 21 Ks." You know? In the morning before I go to work, we're running 21 Ks on trail. It's like a normal trail run for us, like a quick, let's just do a quick trail run. So my perception of distance has now changed, where, 100 Ks is a small day, 100 miles is now the average distance. So potentially push on to 200, maybe 300, you never know what's next.
Amazing how your world shifts.
Yeah. Especially the people that I train with. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, thank you very much. That was incredible.
Feeling fired up after this incredible episode? Dive deeper into the world of trail running by exploring our other episodes, available wherever you get your podcasts. We're eagerly awaiting your feedback as well, so connect with us on Instagram @TrailChasersPod. Don't hold back. Like, comment, message, and share your thoughts. Until next week, keep chasing those trails.